So, what was that movie about? No clue. Well, to be fair, wasn't the smartest decision to watch it in a foreign language. It was in English. Oh. But yeah, I get what you mean. Some dialogues were really hard to understand. Actually, there's a pretty simple explanation to this. And a pretty easy fix. Wait. So you're telling me that any amateur filmmaker could achieve better dialogue and audio quality than some super successful filmmakers? Such as, I don't know, Christopher Nolan? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And I'll tell you how to do it. Okay, so you're telling me that audio quality has actually decreased over the last few years? Well, yeah, but it's more complicated than that. Over the years, cinema has evolved to rely deeply on spectacle and visual effects. So, if a filmmaker has to choose between good visuals and good audio, they will most likely choose good visuals. And with the increasing pressure on filmmakers to make their movies faster, it's not like they really have the choice to do both. And considering all the technological improvement in sound designing, if you mess up the audio during the shooting, you can probably fix it in post. However, it's a very time-demanding process, and not every sound designer has this time on their hand. And sometimes it might not even be possible to fix the audio. Additionally, another problem that comes with technological improvement, nowadays you can put way more sound effects on your timeline, making it overly saturated and making it harder to understand the dialogue. Makes sense. So basically, it's the industry that is to be blamed. Totally. But it's not the only reason. If you look at the past, films used to only be seen in cinemas, making it way easier for the sound designers to mix the movie, because they knew approximately how the movie would sound. And that was only theoretically, because even though the industry standard was to keep the movie's volume at 7 in cinemas, some of them kept it at 5.5, which made some movies really hard to listen to. Nowadays, people also watch movies from their TV with home theaters, meaning that sound designers have to make another mix for house theaters. And if you consider that every sound theaters have different sound systems, then it's literally impossible for the sound designers to know how the movie will sound when watched. Nowadays, another mix has to be made for streaming platforms, which all process sound differently. That sucks, especially considering that the audio is so important in a movie. Maybe even more important than visuals. Right, even Netflix understands that. It's one of the platforms with the best audio processing. Basically, if you're watching Netflix and you're losing internet connection, the platform will lower the visual resolution just to keep the audio at the same quality. I didn't know that. I have so much respect for sound designers now. But you know, the funny thing is that bad dialogue quality can also be an artistic choice. Shit! I know, right? It's baffling. Oh, what? No, I just spilled some water over my pants. What were you saying? I'm listening now. So, what was I saying is that bad dialogue quality could also be an artistic choice. Christopher Nolan, for example, likes to sacrifice dialogue quality for the sake of realism. In the infamous Tenet, for example, Christopher Nolan decides to keep the muffled and inaudible sounds of people talking with masks, rather than doing the sound again in post or getting a better sound on set. All of this for the sake of realism. This is one of the reasons this movie is so hard to understand. Additionally, something else Nolan loves to use in his movies is to make some lines purposefully inaudible because he thinks the story can be better conveyed through music, sound effects, facial expressions. And sometimes it works. For example, in this scene. In this scene, it genuinely makes sense because we are following Neil's perspective, and he is more concentrated into analyzing the place rather than actually listening to what the guy is saying. This is subjective audio. We hear what the character is hearing, and that's good. However, in other parts of the movie, it just becomes frustrating because you don't know what you're supposed to hear and what you're not supposed to hear. And personally, I watched Tenet on my computer, but I heard that in some cinemas, it was way worse. And honestly, I believe it, because Nolan has a tendency to privilege really good quality cinemas at the expense of smaller cinemas, which are unfortunately the majority of them. Wow, never would have thought that making a movie inaudible would be done on purpose. And guess what? I'm not even finished. Throughout the years, acting styles have developed a lot. Yeah, like at the beginning of cinema, actors were more theatrical and expressive, whilst nowadays they try to be more realistic and subtle. Well, some actors try to go even further in this aspect of realism by delivering lines in a mumbly, under-the-breath way. Yeah, who could have thought that badly delivering lines would become an acting style? Okay, but so, at the end of the day, what makes good dialogue? We're touching on the subject of writing now. Well, I'd say good dialogue starts with a purpose. Your character must be speaking for a reason. This reason could be within the story, a character wanting to obtain something from another, literally just for the sake of advancing the plot, or it could be for the sake of making your world more believable. So it could be like exposition, characterization, humor. However, a writer cannot directly tell what the purpose of the dialogue is to the audience. They can imply it, but not tell it. That's the principle of show not tell applied in cinema. You show what a character wants, you don't say it. It might not always be the most realistic approach, but it will clearly be the most enjoyable one for your audience. It's a very simple example, but look at this extract from The Queen's Gambit I just sent you.
Miss Harman. Yes? May I ask you something? In America, I am told that one sees films inside a car. Is this true?
Drive-ins. You mean drive-in movies? I've never been to a drive-in either.
Yeah, so what about it? Well, if you had more than 2 brain cells, you'd notice that in this scene, Beth isn't really talking about drive-ins. In a way, she is telling him that they are the same. In the same way, he feels an outsider in America because he's never been to a drive-in and feels kind of trapped in Russia, envying American freedom. She has never been to a drive-in either, and she feels an outsider to this world she is trapped in, the world of chess. It's been a recurring theme in the show that Beth was considered an outsider in this world, with Beth not being so happy that people define her as a woman playing chess rather than just a chess player. Wait, stop right there. Why are we talking over the phone? We're literally in the same room. I'm talking to you over the phone to do something new in that episode, to change the overall dynamic we had since the beginning of the episode. I don't want the audience to get bored of just seeing both of us sitting and talking to each other. No, you ruined it. Sorry. Alright, so until now, I've only been talking about stuff that has been observed and analyzed by many super talented filmmakers. Now, I'm gonna talk about stuff I noticed and analyzed myself. So hopefully, I won't be saying too much bullshit. Now that we talked about subtext, we can start talking about another very important aspect of dialogue. Conflict. Just like subtext, conflict isn't something that needs to be in every dialogue you write, but it should be in the most important one. For conflict to exist, your character needs to want something, and through the dialogue, they are going to try to achieve it. And to create conflict, the desires of the 2 characters that are talking to each other should clash. Yeah. For example, look at this scene from The Queen's Gambit.
You can live here while you're looking for something permanent.
I thought I could keep the house if I made the payments.
Mr. Wheatley says you misconstrued him. He claims he was just permitting you to stay in the house until you got settled.
That's not true.
In this scene, Austin wants the house, but Beth isn't ready to give it to him. That's the conflict. Which brings me to my next point. To be interesting, conflict should lead to a change. The initial situation cannot be the same as the final one. In this scene, Austin starts by looking guilty and silent, and at the end, he becomes louder and more unpleasant. Beth starts calmly, and her rage slowly builds up throughout the scene until she can't contain herself anymore. And what is interesting about this scene is the way that both characters are trying to gain power, and how it is shown through the camera work. At the beginning of the scene, the power dynamic is established through the composition. Beth, by being placed in the middle of the frame, looks very powerful and in control of the situation. Austin, on the other hand, is only on a third of the frame and seems really little and occupies very little space. This communicates that at this very moment, Austin is very weak and that he is trying to pull away from the conflict. That's why he's trying to look away from Beth. He's acting in a very non-confrontational way. Later in the scene, when he finally starts confronting Beth, he is also placed in the middle of the frame. However, the power dynamic is soon re-established by the camera angle shifting to a high angle on him and a low angle on Beth.
Pathetic? Well, I'm looking at pathetic.
Showing that despite him trying to gain power, Beth stays in control of the situation. All of this to say that despite good dialogue being mostly achieved through good writing, it can only reach its full potential through cinematography. And let's not forget all the other aspects that can affect the dialogue, such as acting, directing, sound designing, directing, and mise en scène, etc. Great. You know, power dynamics are not the only things that is important to set up through the cinematography and mise en scène. Oh yeah? What else? Think about it. It's not everything to say something. You also have to show the impact it has on the characters. And you do that through subscribing to this channel? No, it's not even remotely close to the answer I was expecting from you. Yeah, I panicked, I'm sorry. You do that through filming reaction shots. It's useless to edit a dialogue scene to be super fast and rhythmed if you can't see what it means to the characters. This is why you should edit dialogues using J-cuts. I mean, yeah, but that's not the answer I wanted. Because despite the J-cut being super famous and popular, I think it isn't the most effective one, at least in most cases. I wanted to talk about the L-cut. Just to make it clear, a J-cut is when the sound comes before the image. For example, you would start to talk and then the camera would start filming. Cutting after the person starts to talk makes the cut smoother and also more realistic, since in real life, you only start looking at the other person once they start talking. I get it. So that would be a J-cut. Yeah, now let's get to the good part, the L-cut. The L-cut is basically just the opposite. The image comes before the sound. So if you want an example, the camera would switch to you as I finish talking. And then comes my answer. Got it. Exactly. The reason I personally prefer this cut is because it gives more time to the dialogue to breathe. It allows us to see the characters react to what is being said. You can even emphasize this effect by taking longer breaks between the lines to give to your characters more time to react and think. Now, sometimes J-cuts are better. It is for you to decide when to use which. Generally, I find the L-cut more appealing. But wait, I don't get it. We were supposed to talk about how to write a dialogue, how to film it. Yeah, well, there's no point in writing good dialogue if you don't know how to deliver it and film it. And one last thing. When filming a dialogue, it's not good enough to just make over the shoulders, reverse shot, and over the shoulders again, as I often see in many amateur movies. You need to vary the shots. For example, in The Lost Daughter, the dialogues are filmed with a repetition of the same camera angles all of the time, which is one of the reasons why I find this movie really boring. Let's go! God damn, you beat me again. One more thing. Bro, you are a maniac. It's 1 in the morning. I know, but there's one last thing I noticed. Some of the most famous lines ever written have some kind of melody to them, I find. And many modern actors, it feels like, don't know how to deliver the lines properly in a compelling way. They've just been taught to do it in a realistic way, which, you know, it's good. It's just not that interesting to watch, you know? Some words should be emphasized in a certain way to make it just more interesting. I get what you mean. It's probably why one of the most famous lines in all time is, "I am your father." And not just, "I'm your father." Surprisingly, what you just said made a lot of sense. Wow. But I don't think it's the only reason why this line is so great. It's also, surprisingly enough, due to the lack of music and sound effects. I mean, it's just his voice and a very limited amount of sound effects, actually. It makes it so the timeline isn't saturated with noise and you can actually hear what he's saying. And honestly, I feel like silence sometimes can be really powerful. It just makes everything so much more dramatic, you know? And I don't know why so many recent filmmakers like to blast super loud music and sound effects into your ears. It's like, I don't care you got Hans Zimmer to do your music for your film. I just want to know what is happening. With all due respect to Hans Zimmer, because he's great. I feel like dialogue has lost its value in many modern films. It's like filmmakers don't really want to put that much effort in one good piece of dialogue, because they put so much different dialogues throughout their movie. And often, I feel like the movies with the best dialogues are the movie with the less dialogues.